Hello and namaste once again. Have you ever wondered how there are certain things which help us to learn, whereas there are certain barriers to learning? Earlier, we learnt about classical conditioning and operant conditioning. There are a lot of important terms in both these types of conditioning, which I will be talking about in class so that it will help you in PYQs because the MCQs that are set make you confused. You think you'll know, but then in the exam hall, you may wonder what is the right answer. So I'll help you with the important terms with regard to operant conditioning and classical conditioning in class. So today we will learn about what factors help in learning or facilitate learning, and that is how they increase the rate of learning, whereas some factors decrease the rate of extinction. So this video is about factors facilitating learning. Just a moment. Yes. So this topic is about understanding the factors which control or shape how we learn and what could be the barriers. So we will talk about reinforcement schedules, motivation and preparedness in this video. So firstly, what are reinforcement schedules? Psychologists who have tried to understand how humans learn have used different animals in their experiments like rats and chimpanzees. So they arranged reinforcement on specific schedules. There are two kinds of reinforcement, continuous and partial reinforcement. So continuous reinforcement is when the animal receives the reinforcement at every trial. Every right response, it receives the pellet of food whenever the lever is pressed. Whereas partial reinforcement, there are intermittent schedules and ratio schedules. Basically, it's when the animal receives the food pellet or the reinforcement after every 10 uh, presses on the lever, every 5, every 10, so on, as decided by the researcher. So these factors have been found to be critically important for how quickly responses are acquired and how long they persist. That is, how they control extinction. So what exactly is continuous reinforcement and partial reinforcement? So continuous reinforcement, the reinforcement is received after every target response. In the case of classical conditioning, the pressing of the lever. So this produces a high rate of response because every time there's a right response or the target response, the subject receives the reinforcement. And effectiveness of the reinforcer is reduced over time because of the same reason. Every time there's a target response, there is a reinforcement and hence the effectiveness reduces over time. And responses extinguish soon after the reinforcement stops. It takes very less time for extinction to happen. Whereas in partial reinforcement, some responses are not reinforced. Like I said, the researcher or the experimenter decides when the reinforcement has to be given after every 5 target responses or at the 10th response and so on. So this produces a very high response rate, especially the ratio schedules. And it is difficult to know when the reinforcement has been discontinued or delayed, and because of this the responses are highly resistant to extinction as we don't know. We can't say when the reinforcement was discontinued or delayed. So this what the partial reinforcement leads to is called the partial reinforcement effect. So extinction of a response is more difficult following partial reinforcement because the organism experiences non-reinforced trials and it cannot tell when reinforcement has been discontinued or stopped. So this resistance to extinction is called the partial reinforcement effect. The next is motivation, how it influences our learning. So motivation, as we all know, is a mental state, but it's also a physiological state which helps us to act so that we can attain our goal. It's a physiological state because there is something called thirst motivation, hunger motivation, sleep motivation. We all need to satisfy our bodily requirements. And that's how, when we are hungry, we get up and go get something to eat. And once we are full, we stop feeling hungry, we have attained our goal, and thus the hunger motivation stops. So such acts persist until the goal is attained and the need is satisfied. And that's how motivation is a prerequisite for learning, because we learn how to satisfy our needs or our goals through motivation. So an example for motivation is when the mother hides sweets in the kitchen because too many sweets are not good for the child. But as soon as the mother steps out, the child forages in the kitchen for sweets and gets to know the location of the jar in which the sweets are kept. This is because of motivated exploration. The child is motivated to have sweets. There is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is learning because you enjoy the activity. You are internally motivated because of your curiosity and satisfaction that you gain out of learning. Extrinsic motivation is pursuing a degree, for example, so that you just want the certificate. It's a means to passing exams and earning grades so that you earn the certificate and you move on to the next level of education. So that is extrinsic. And another factor which facilitates learning is preparedness for learning. So different species vary in sensory capacities and response capacities, and the stimulus or stimulus response mechanisms also are different in different species. So each species has its own biological constraints for learning, and one can learn only those associations for which one is genetically prepared. So we all have our genetic or biological constraints. So there's a continuum, a preparedness continuum, which shows that certain organisms are prepared to learn certain things. Like, for example, humans or human babies can learn to walk and talk. These associations are learned easily because of our genotype. Whereas we are unprepared, meaning we learn a few skills only with great difficulty. Like, for example, with difficulty, we learn to swim. We are not natural swimmers. Not prepared, we can never learn to fly. We can use our intelligence and prepare aircrafts, parachutes, etc., so that we can fly, but we are not natural at flying. Or fish can't learn to walk because of our biological or genetic constraints. So a particular associative learning task may be easy for apes or humans, but very difficult or sometimes impossible for other species like cats and rats. So preparedness is best understood as a spectrum. So this is about factors facilitating learning, and I will see you again in the next video. Until then, thank you so much and bye bye.